continue our NBA conversation, talk some Sixers, talk some NBA playoffs with the man himself. He covers the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com, covers the NBA for 24/7 Sports. Follow him on Twitter at The Real Mike KB. Michael Kaskey-Blomain joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, how you doing on this Saturday?
Josh, I'm doing pretty well, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. So, obviously, we got to start with the Sixers. Season's done. But you were at the exit interviews. You know, Monday it was the players. Tuesday it was Brett Brown, Elton Brand, and Josh Harris. So, you know, just give me and the audience some initial impressions of, you know, what was the vibe that you took away from those two final days as the players and the big names, the head coach, the GM, and everybody was there. What was your initial impressions when you walked away from Monday and Tuesday?
You know, it was pretty unique, Josh, because I feel like it was kind of almost a combination of like three different emotions wrapped into one. I mean, there was definitely a sense of disappointment that was, you know, you could definitely sense that from Joel to, you know, Brett to Jimmy. I think that they all thought that they're, you know, not that they didn't live up to their potential necessarily, but that there was an opportunity to, you know, get farther than they got. And, you know, to lose in a Game 7 on that, you know, crazy Kawhi shot. You know, I think there was just like a general sense of disappointment. But like on top of that disappointment, there was general, you know, positivity and optimism, especially from like Joel, Ben, these guys that are saying that, you know, they're disappointed, but that they can build on it and that they love, you know, the direction of the team and everything and like that. And then the third layer on top of that was kind of just this general feeling of uncertainty because there's so much, you know, up in the air for the Sixers this season that it's hard for them to feel like, all right, well, we can definitely build on that when they don't know if 3 out of their 5 starters are even going to be back on the team next year. So it was pretty much like those 3 layers, you know, competing with each other is kind of how the vibe felt those last couple of days.
When you think about, you mentioned the word disappointment. Do you think it was disappointment in terms of they knew they could have gotten farther? Or was it also disappointment because, as Jimmy Butler said, there's a feeling that, you know, this group of guys may never be together again?
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. That was some of it, and that's some of it, you know, wrapped into that uncertainty. I think it would have been one thing if they lost in the manner that they lost in Game 7 at the buzzer, and they knew, you know, all right, we're running it back next year. These same guys are all going to be back. I think that, you know, in some way or another, the exact team obviously is not going to be back exactly as it is next year. And they thought that, you know, this team was put together pretty quickly and they didn't have a very long learning curve in terms of chemistry and getting to know each other. But the talent was there and the respect was there. You know, they all liked playing with each other. They all respected each other's games. So I do think that there was, you know, a feeling of, man, we had this awesome opportunity of this talent that might not be recreated again. And it kind of slipped through our fingers.
You know, when you mentioned it slipped through their fingers, I know that for guys like Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, they're going to be big-name free agents, but you also mentioned the rest of the guys. You know, when they acquired Tobias, they also got Mike Scott. They also acquired James Ennis. They also acquired Boban. Where does this offseason leave the other guys? I know a lot of headlines are focused on what Harris going to do, what Butler's going to do, but what about the other guys? You know, you have to sign other players. You know, one of the concerns when LeBron and those guys were in Miami, one of the concerns with the Warriors the last couple of years has been, how are you going to fill out the rest of the roster with quality players when so much of the salary cap is devoted to the big names? So where do you foresee the plan is for the rest of the roster?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. And it's pretty crazy. Out of this, you know, the entire team that the Sixers had last year, the only 4 players that are under contract for next season are, you know, Joel, Ben, Zaire Smith, and Jonah Bolden. That's it. So, I mean, you're looking at what could potentially be an entirely different rotation next year. I mean, James Ennis has a player option. I'm assuming he'll decline that. And Jimmy Butler has a player option. I'm, you know, assuming he'll decline that. But, you know, these guys, the playoffs tend to, you know, shed light on other, you know, role players as well as the superstars. There's just much more, you know, there's more eyes, more magnification on the players in play in postseason. So, I mean, a guy like Mike Scott, who played pretty well for the Sixers and fits pretty well into today's NBA in terms of his versatility, on both ends of the ball, his ability to guard multiple positions, his ability to space the floor as a, a front court player. A guy like that could be, pretty heavily in demand where, and the thing for the Sixers is they have a pecking order, in terms of their money allocation. So they obviously have Ben and Joel locked up, and then they have to figure out what they're going to do with those other max spots that, Jimmy, Tobias, the fifth starter spot where JJ's at. And then they have to trickle down to see what they have left and then go to the bench. And the unfortunate thing there is, some of these guys, whether it be, a James Ennis, Mike Scott, even a JJ, they'll probably have opportunities elsewhere. And the Sixers might not, necessarily be able to match financially or timeline wise. So I think that you'll end up seeing a couple of these guys are probably going to get kind of, signed out from underneath the Sixers where a matter of either they can't afford them, in the salary cap, or that they don't act quick enough because they're kind of waiting to see, what Jimmy does, what Tobias does, things like that.
Yeah, and we saw that last offseason, with the fact that the Sixers had other guys they were targeting first, and you could argue whether rightly or wrongly, the argument could be made that guys like Ersan Ilyasova slipped through their fingers because they were focused on other things. If you're the Sixers and you had to pick one between Butler and Harris, I think you have to look at Butler first, right? Because of the fact that he had such a major impact on this postseason run. You see the relationship he has with Embiid and Simmons. It just feels like that guy is such an important fit. And nothing against Tobias, but he's probably going to have more suitors on the free agent market, right?
Yeah, I agree, Josh. I think Jimmy has to be your A1 target. I think they're probably looking at it like it's, a 1A and a 1B situation. But Jimmy is just, a little bit more of a game changer type of a player than Tobias, who I think is, a great fit on the Sixers and obviously a great talent for the style of play that the league is, in today. But Jimmy's a guy that is just, as we've seen throughout the playoffs, he's a guy that can change the game on both ends of the floor, a big shot maker, a guy that's not afraid to step up in the clutch. So I think he's a guy that, and like you said, I think we saw the relationship between him and Joel and the relationship between him and Ben develop during the 6-7 months, that he's been here already. And I think if they could continue to build off that and, it would put Jimmy in a situation where he's not looked at to be, the top, go-to scorer every single night. He has two young guns in Joel and Ben that can, carry a lot of the workload. But then at the same time, he's in a role where he's looked at to be, a guy that delivers in the clutch and a go-to guy, which, for a player that's aging past into his 31-year-old seasons, as Jimmy will be on this next contract, it's pretty an ideal situation for him to be in. So I think if you're the Sixers, you really got to try to get Jimmy locked down as soon as possible. And then, obviously Tobias will be right there. And then after that, you kind of look down and see which other of these guys that you had, are still available and you want to bring back that could fit within the framework of the salary that you're looking to put out.
Yeah, because when you look at Jimmy Butler, this is a guy who's not he's not in the same situation as some of the other players who are going to be on free agency. This is a guy, he told Chris Haynes, his happiness is most important to him. He told JJ Redick, he's happy with his minivan. He's not looking to, it's not just about money for him. Yeah, he wants to make money, but he keeps saying again and again, his happiness and, him enjoying the game of basketball. That's what's important to him. And you have to think that if he's happy in Philadelphia, it's most likely he's staying. Whereas a lot of guys when they have free agency, they're ring chasing, they're money chasing, they want to go back home. Butler just seems like his set of priorities is a lot different than everybody else in free agency.
I definitely agree with that, Josh. But the only thing for me is it's really hard to tell if, at least, from my perspective, if he is genuinely happy in Philadelphia. I think he definitely has enjoyed his time with the Sixers. I think he does. There's no, he respects all of the teammates. He likes Brett. I don't think there's any issues or anything like that. But I feel like it was kind of always hard to get a read on him in terms of, long term of his idea in Philadelphia. And he spoke at, the exit interviews on Monday, and I thought obviously he was asked about free agency, and I thought his response was pretty interesting. He really talked about the people around him that, allow him to do what he does, basically his team, if you will, and their families, He said, them being happy with the location and everything is equally as important to, the main thing for him to be happy is that all the important people around him are also happy with the decision. He said he's obviously not in Philly long term. He added yet when he was talking about it, but it just left it pretty ambiguous. I couldn't tell one way or another how he really, truly felt about staying in Philly long term. So obviously they can offer him the most money, but like you said, if money's not his top concern and maybe location is, if Philly's not his top choice, he could be one of those guys that you would see, turn down the potential super max from the Sixers in favor of, a max deal elsewhere.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining me on the Boardwalk Honda hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him for all your Sixers and NBA coverage at The Real Mike KB. And Mike, look, we've also seen athletes take less money to stay in a place. When Wade, Bosh, and LeBron teamed up down in Miami, all of them took less money. We've seen Steph Curry take less money with the Warriors. We've seen Clay take less money. So I don't know if money is also going to be the prohibitive thing, but looking over to Tobias Harris, and I'm not wishing he leaves, so I keep having to preface it, but there's one team that I think makes the most sense for him. And I want to know what you think. I've been bringing this up this week. If I am this team, I am making the full court press for Tobias Harris, and that's the Golden State Warriors. Your thoughts?
Wow. I honestly hadn't thought about that. Why do you think that he would be such a good fit in Golden State? Let me ask.
Well, first of all, I think because he is an unselfish guy. I think the Warriors, who we've seen the last 3 games, they've looked better without Durant because they can keep the ball moving. They're constantly in movement. They're constantly passing. And I think because Tobias has shown himself to be a teamwork guy and he's a very good rebounder, I think because of his skill set, if Durant leaves as we expect him to, I think he would slide right in there and be a perfect fit for the way they run their offense and what they ask of their guys being as unselfish as they are.
Okay, I got you. Honestly, Josh, I hadn't really even thought about that, but that's an interesting point, and especially with the Warriors, they're going to have to, obviously so much hinges on what Durant does. If he re-ups, they're not going to be looking to bring in a guy like that, obviously. But if he does leave, they could be looking like a vastly different team next year. I mean, obviously, Klay Thompson is hitting, set for unrestricted free agency this summer. It's assumed that the Warriors will offer him max money, but if not, he could be looking to go elsewhere. So, in a shakeup in Golden State, I think if you're in terms of having Steph and Draymond in place moving forward, Tobias would fit really nicely in the framework of what they have, going on. But at the same time, with his game that you kind of just laid out, he'll have a lot of suitors for that exact reason, because a lot of these teams are trying to play, a similar style to what Golden State has obviously had so much success with. Tobias is one of those guys that you can really almost just slide into, a forward spot in your lineup. And like you said, because he's so malleable, unselfish, and versatile, that he can be, a nice cog on a team if you already have a couple, really top tier pieces in place. So, that's an interesting option for him for sure. But one thing about Tobias is that I do think he'll have, certainly no shortage of suitors this summer.
Absolutely. And sticking with the Warriors, I brought this stat up yesterday. I brought it up again today. And this blows my mind, Mike. In the last 29 games in which Curry plays and Durant doesn't, the Warriors are 28-1. Over the last 5 seasons when Curry doesn't play, the Warriors are 26-26. It is so obvious how important Steph is to that team. And I'm not saying Durant is a bum. I'm not saying that the Warriors should kick him out the door and tell him never come back. But there's something to be said for the fact that offense functions optimally when he's not on the court, because there's so many times when the ball stops with Durant. Whereas when he's not on the floor, you're seeing that Steph and Clay and Draymond and Iguodala and all these guys, it's almost like they can function at their max ability. And there's almost a part of me that hopes that Durant leaves, because I want to see the Warriors get back to what I've seen in the last 3 games.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably in the majority there, Josh. I definitely think most NBA fans want to see, Durant leave, A, just for parity's sake, and B, like you said, it's prettier basketball watching the Warriors there, playing like they used to play pre-Durant. And what you just said is, it's something that Seth Curry, Steph's brother, basically said after game one, or after game two, excuse me, of the conference finals, where he basically said that they're harder to guard when Durant doesn't play. He qualified it by saying, of course, like, Durant's one of the best scorers in the game and all that. But, when he plays, so much of the Warriors offense becomes just by default because of how good he is and the mismatches that he draws. It's a lot of ISO, a lot of post-ups for Durant, which, in turn leads to more stationary, more of the guys just standing around. When he's out there, like you said, it's constant ball movement. It's more cutting. It's more spacing. It's more Steph just doing the crazy things that we became accustomed to him doing before Durant signed there when he won the 2 MVP awards. So it's a more, aesthetically pleasing brand of basketball. So I think that, most NBA fans share that sentiment that they hope, he leaves, just to go somewhere else because he's so good that wherever he goes, that team is automatically going to become, a playoff team and probably a contender. So him leaving would, turn another team into a contender, which would make it, more competitive. And B, like you said, the Warriors will still be good, assuming that they can, bring back Clay, Draymond still there, Steph's still there, and if they can fill out the rest of the roster with some solid players, they'll still be the Warriors, not quite as good as they've been with KD, but still right there. So, I think a lot of people are hoping that Durant leaves, and I think that's, I don't know obviously, but it seems like that's the direction that, if they're able to three-peat and get this title again in June, it's pretty likely, it seems like, at least, that he would be looking to go elsewhere.
And also the Warriors are playing the Blazers. Look, the Blazers are not a bad team, but I just think they're outmatched in some ways in terms of experience and in terms of overall flexibility, in terms of their depth, and it definitely hurts without Nurkic out there. What do you think the Blazers do this offseason? Because this is a team that's shown, look, they have the 2-star players to be successful, and Nurkic has shown himself to be a great player as well, but it just seems like even when Nurkic was there, it just had this feel of they're still one guy away. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's definitely fair, Josh. But the problem with Portland is they have a lot of money tied up in, not only their two core guys, Dame, who will be getting almost $30 million next year, CJ, who'll be getting $27 million next year. Evan Turner's up there in like $18 million, Nurkic $12 million, Mo Harkless $11 million, Myers Leonard another $10 million. I mean, they have a lot of guys that are under contract for double-digit millions, and when you're strapped like that, that's usually a team that's kind of reached its ceiling in terms of adding top shelf talent. And it feels like the Blazers are almost, like you said, they're a really good team, but they're not a legitimate championship contender. They're one piece away. And, I just don't know how they go about adding that third piece that could really catapult them to the next level with the talent that they have. Maybe if they could package, Nurkic and Mo Harkless and add, someone that's a better, front court player or something like that. But overall, it seems like the Blazers are, they're at that state where they're a really good team, but they're, have to take that next step to a great team. And I don't know how they'll really be able to do that.
Flipping over to the Eastern Conference, I mean, these two games between the Raptors and Bucks, it keeps feeling more and more like the better team is winning these games. I mean, when Brook Lopez wins you one game, and then the next game, Giannis looks more and more like the MVP each second of the game goes by. It just has this feel that, look, Kawhi is great, but it just feels like the Raptors are just totally outmatched.
Yeah, and you said it, Josh. It's that the better team has been winning these games. And that's why I predicted, going into the series after I watched, obviously, the Sixers-Raptors series and the Bucks-Celtics series in the last round. It just seemed that the Bucks were, just a better team. Kawhi had to do so much against the Sixers, basically, by himself to get them to the conference finals, where Giannis has a plethora of guys around him that none of them are superstar level players. Chris Middleton obviously is an all-star, but then you have other guys that can step up at any given night. Like you said, in game one, it was Brook Lopez. Last game two, Eric Bledsoe played better and Malcolm Brogdon played better, both offensively and defensively. So they just have guys. Ilyasova was making shots for them, making plays. They have guys that are stepping up, where I feel like the Raptors just rely so heavily on Kawhi to do everything for them on both ends of the floor. So, I think Toronto will probably be able to pull out a game, in at home, one of these next two games, 3 or 4. But ultimately, like you said, I think the Bucks are just as good as Kawhi is. The Bucks are a better team, and they'll probably make short work in either 5 or 6 games.
Also, how much of a case is a guy like Giannis making for, there was this void when LeBron left the East, right? And who's going to be the king of the East? Even if all the free agents come East, you could make the argument that Giannis is making the case that he's the new king of the Eastern Conference, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, Josh. I would say, especially assuming that they're able to advance past the Raptors, and no one knows, what Kawhi is going to do next year. If Giannis is established himself, obviously, as an MVP candidate, both him and the Bucks have taken huge steps. So, I mean, with LeBron gone, he was the first guy to kind of go after that throne this year, and now it'll be his to defend.
Who do you think is a higher ceiling? And I mean, I know in some ways this may sound like almost a sacrilegious question, but who really has a higher ceiling? Do you think it's Giannis or Embiid?
I think it's Giannis, Josh. Obviously, I think Joel is one of the highest ceilings in the league. But if you look at what Giannis can do with his size, you just really, I can't even really express it. You just don't see that often in terms of his ability to really play like a guard, but also dominate on the interior, his length, all that, and he's already developing that shot from distance. He's becoming more comfortable with it. It's looking a little bit more fluid, and that's he's one step away with that shot from being absolutely dominant. So as good as Joel is, I think that at this point Giannis is arguably the best player in the league. And also, of course, the Joel's issues with his injuries and conditioning have kind of held him back. And if that was something that he could put in the rearview mirror, that would change things a little bit. But for now, we still have to accept everything about Joel, which includes the injury issues. And Giannis has been, largely healthy and available for the Bucks throughout his career. So, as much as we all love Joel, I think you got to go with Giannis there.
But people can hear all the NBA postseason action right here on 97.3 ESPN tonight. Warriors versus Blazers, Game 3 tomorrow night. Bucks versus Raptors, Game 3. Michael Kaskey-Blomain has been joining me on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. And Mike, before I let you go, I want to ask your perspective on the report that came out this week that the NBA is looking to move up the start of free agency from midnight to 6 p.m. on June 30th. I just want to give your perspective for the audience about what do you think of that proposal? Do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing? Just kind of some thoughts on it, because I think it's definitely a unique concept.
Yeah, it is. And I know most of my coworkers and all of us that have to work to cover the the opening of free agency are happy about it, since it's means we don't have to be working at necessarily up to 4 a.m. I always kind of liked it because I thought it was kind of unique how it was this one night a year where things just went crazy in the NBA and all these reports and signings came out. But I think it's probably my guess is they'll have some sort of like an ESPN special on during it where they'll have Woj and you'll be able to track all the the things that are going on. So it'll make for good theater. I think it'll draw more other than the people that are really hardcore NBA fans. You're usually not awake at midnight to follow that news. So I think it'll allow for more people to follow it, the things as they happen. And just it's another opportunity, I think, for the NBA to kind of, expand its reach and kind of, make a smaller thing into like a bigger deal for the content hype machine, if you will.
Do you think it also could change how teams strategize a little bit targeting free agency? Because the fact that, look, last year, Magic Johnson's waiting outside LeBron's house at midnight. We've heard all the stories over the years, Mark Cuban with some of the stuff that he's done. Do you think changing at 6 p.m. Eastern, which is 3 p.m. Pacific, how does that potentially change maybe team strategy as well?
Yeah, that's a good point, Josh. They won't have the opportunity to, lock players in hotel rooms or whatever at midnight necessarily anymore. But, I think it's one of those things where this year they'll probably take some adapting and adjusting since it's something that's new. They'll probably have to push the recruiting, forward the night before or something like that and try to keep the players under wraps until the official hour comes. But I think it's one of those things that once if it's going to stand, they'll get used to it, figure out ways to adapt. But I certainly hope that it doesn't mean that we're not going to get as many, juicy stories like the ones you just referred to, because those are always pretty entertaining in the middle of the summer.
Who knows? We might get more juicy stories with it being 6 p.m. instead of midnight.
Right, hopefully.
The real Mike KB on Twitter. Follow him. He covers the 76ers for us at 97.3 ESPN.com and writes about the NBA at 24/7 Sports. Mike, appreciate your time on a Saturday and hope you get to enjoy the weekend.
Thanks, Josh. You too.